Welcome back, gamers. Boy, oh boy, I tell you, what a way to end a week. What a way to end the first round, and what a way to start the second. We have some big bouts coming up here. So big that Brendan and I just don't feel that it would be responsible for us to take them on by ourselves. So, who do we have with us here, Professor?
Well, I'm glad to introduce our friend Jason Brooks from Brookspun Games. Say hi, Jason.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Brendan. Thanks for having me, Rob. It is a pleasure to be here on Game Fight Show.
Game Fight Show.
Game Fight Show.
Now, eagle-eyed listeners will remember, Jason, you joined us last year for the March Mayhem tournament. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I did. It feels like it was just about a year ago.
Feel like I haven't even left my house.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're so glad to have you back here. And boy, I hope that it feels like as much of a treat to you as it does to me to be able to talk about these 4 great games that are going head-to-head against one another. We have The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9, coming up against Brass Birmingham.
Oodalali.
No joke. And then we have Everdell up against none other than
Twilight Imperium 4.
Ooh. I can't contain myself, Rob. I thought last round was exciting as Brass took out Great Western Trail and as the Crew took out, one of my favorites, Betrayal at House on the Hill. But now things are just getting tighter. I don't know how the people are going to decide.
You know what's happening here is the heat is getting hotter. They thought it couldn't be done. Physics was not sure whether our planet could contain this level of heat, but it turns out
it can.
They say when the kitchen gets hot, some people run for it. Jason comes on in. Jason, what brought you in today for this bout? How do you feel about these 2 games?
Oh, I am a fan. I am thrilled to be talking about them, and to be honest, if we could put one of them on the table right now, I would be absolutely happy to.
I'm not sure that I haven't played Brass Birmingham with you. I think we've played this live and in person before, and I know that's the sort of game that's right up your alley. For those of you who don't know, shame on you. Jason Brooks is
shame on you.
He's an excellent designer, and his game Legacies is going to be coming at us in just a minute. And if you want to talk about a nice, heavy, meaty Euro, well, you can talk about Brass. You could also talk about Legacies. But for now, let's focus on Brass for a second. Jason, tell me about Brass. Grab a beer. Let's talk Brass.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk brass tacks. I would grab a barrel of beer to talk about Brass Birmingham. Boy, this was a great sequel to Brass Lancashire. I played Brass Lancashire first and fell in love with that game with my very first play of it. But the second that Brass Birmingham hit the table, I knew that he had improved on that great original that he had first made.
Well, sort of a bold move from Martin Wallace, who was solo on the original Brass, which now we're calling Brass Lancashire. He brought in some big guns to work with him on this. Is it a sequel? Is it a remake? I'll leave that up to you to decide. I just know it's a great game. He brought in Gavin Brown and Matt Tolman, and they really worked some magic on this little thing.
If I had $1 for every time someone told me, this is great, the only thing it needs is beer, then I'd have a lot of dollars. But it feels like that was the first step in that collaboration.
I'm just so excited that it made it through here. Brass had a tough fight there against Great Western Trail, a game that's got a lot of buzz as it's about to get a new edition and 2 new games coming out behind it. So it had a bit of a machine, but that did not keep Brass from coming out on top. And do you think, Brass is coming up against the Crew here? Quest for Planet 9.
Rob,
this is another example in the bracket here, Brendan. I'm going to interrupt you because I don't want to listen to you talk right now.
Fair.
This is an example of something that's been happening time and time again in the bracket this year. I think maybe this year more than most, where we have games that are so different coming up against each other. The Crew, Quest for Planet 9. You could get a game of that done in 5 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah.
You won't be done taking the pieces out of the box and setting up Brass in that 5 minutes.
Indeed. Again, like you said, Rob, throughout the bracket, the fans have had to figure out how to compare apples to oranges, how to compare these sort of an hors d'oeuvre tasty game that is just perfection versus, a big heavy meal where both of them have their place and both of them have their fans, but it is really difficult to tease apart. I was thinking about, you were talking about Brass, and part of what brought it through, I think, over Great Western Trail with its upcoming advances is that, Brass is here now. People can play it. Great Western Trail, that's fancy talk. People can talk about how great the new version is going to be, but until it's on our tables, I don't think we're gonna give it the votes. I think if we have a rematch next year, Great Western Trails, if that new version is out yet, it's going to be a different ball game. I think Brass has a real challenger in the Crew. The Crew is incredibly accessible. Brass is limited by its complexity, and the Crew has family weight value. It's got tons and tons of fans. It's going to be really hard for the Martin Wallace stands out there to bring the thunder enough to get past the Crew.
Jason, I don't know if you kept track of the seeding in this tournament this year, but the Crew is the number 1 seeded game in the whole darn tournament up against Brass Birmingham here, which is all the way down at 16. And I think that just goes to prove that Brendan's he's not talking out of the seat of his pants there when he says that the Crew cannot be discounted from the possibility of taking not only this bout, but it could go all the way. I say this game, once again, number 1 seed. It's owned by almost 30,000 people, and people are just playing the heck out of this game. Could it go all the way? Rob says yes.
With that number 1 seed for the Crew, the person that I think is probably the most upset right now is probably Clyde Tombaugh. I mean, if you didn't know, he was the one who originally discovered Planet 9, Pluto, which unfortunately had its title revoked. And if you ask me, I think the Crew is going to have its title revoked as well. Coming in as the number 1 seed, it's got high expectations, but I don't think it holds a candle to Brass Birmingham. Sorry, and I know it's dangerous to hold a candle near anything in the game of Brass.
With that high intensity oxygen in the Crew, you don't want a candle there either.
No doubt. Brendan and I hold ourselves to a level of strict journalistic impartiality, and that's one of the reasons we bring on these excellent guest commentators here in the second round.
And you, Jason.
Brendan is me.
The quest for option 9.
Hey, wait, Brendan, where'd Jason go? Why is the call, Brendan?
Oh no.
We need someone here to share their honest thoughts about these very important matters, such as which one of these games belongs in the next round. And I'm hearing an unequivocal Brass Birmingham from our friend Jason Brooks of Brookspun Games here. I'm going to tell you the truth. I won't be surprised either way. Whichever one comes out there. Brass Birmingham, it is number 3 overall on the BGG ranks at the time of recording, whereas the Crew is number 44. So, it looks like some of the numbers are going to back you up there, Jason. But there's only one way that we're ever going to find this out for sure, and that is if the good listener slides over to Twitter, logs on, goes to @GameFightShow, and they vote. Are you going to vote for Brass Birmingham? Are you going to vote for the Crew? I don't know. There's only one way I'm going to find out. Speaking of finding things out, about 2 years ago at Gen Con, I think a lot of people found out that Everdell was ready to drop into their hot little hands, and they were going to find out if this thing was living up to the hype. Let me ask you a question here, gents. Does Everdell live up to the hype?
Oh, well, since you had to plant that seed, I must admit I was one of those folks at Gen Con 2 years ago, regularly walking by the Everdell table, looking at the roots that were established there, both in the fan base as well as the aesthetics of the game itself, with the 3D tree that emanates from the table. In terms of table presence, I feel like there's only one game that might be able to compete with that.
Ooh.
And I think it might be its competitor.
Well, its competitor is another game. We think about this game as being an old game, but Twilight Imperium 4, that's only 2 years older than our Everdell there, coming out in 2017. And this game, it's beloved. You're right. When it's out on the table, it is gorgeous. And it is a beautiful piece of work that they just keep on chipping away at, trying to refine this down to being just what they want it to be. And I think they did a great job with 4 over 3 as far as versions of Twilight Imperium there. I want to say something here. You know, we were talking before in the Crew versus Brass about how different those games are. Clearly, these are very different games. The Twilight Imperium 4 and Everdell. But I want to say that if you look at it in another light, there are ways in which they're not totally dissimilar. Once again, Jason, I think you're showing just why we brought you on here. Table presence, these both are going to be just pleasing their fans left, right, and center with the way they look on a table. You know, we've talked about how Everdell, you start at 0. It seems like you're never going to be able to do anything. And then it ramps up to the point where it's just chaos. It's bedlam. Just everything's happening all at once. I think that there's some of that arc to a game of Twilight Imperium.
You know, the similarities don't stop there, Rob. I think the big thing that drew people in with Everdell, as Jason pointed out, it's table presence. It's not only the physical objects, the cute little resin berries and the little logs for the components, but it's also the beautiful Andrew Bosley art all over the place on all those cards. But I think Twilight Imperium does that too. It's got all those cool ships. It's got the beautiful space planets. And we shouldn't forget, Twilight Imperium also has anthropomorphic animals. Space lions are a crucial part of the box art and the gameplay. And you could be space turtles. And like I think both of these games bring a kind of delight of fantasy, even though Twilight Imperium is sort of strictly science fiction. I would say one more thing, if I can, about Everdell.
I'll allow it.
Twilight Imperium might appear to be the winner in terms of table space because it's just so expansive, right? When you set up a 6-player game of Twilight Imperium, you're talking the entire game topper and some side tables probably. But as a connoisseur of Everdell, I will say they've been aggressively expanding that game, and it's made in a way that you can play each one, and they just give you more and more boards that surround the base board, and they add in more little gizmos and cards and modules. And, you know, I think they probably encourage you to play 1 or 2 modules at a time, but it's set up in a way that you can play them all. And now there's rumor coming that very soon they're going to add 2 more expansions.
Would you say that there are any gigaws?
There's gigaws, there's knickknacks, there's a little bit of hullabaloo. To use your favorite phrase, it's a nice bit of business.
It is a very nice bit of business. Both of these games, from a component perspective, you just can't lose with either one of these. Will Twilight Imperium's sort of 1 week playtime versus Everdell's sort of more manageable couple hours figure in here? Probably, but will it figure in whose advantage? You know, whose favor? Because have you ever heard someone who sat down to play a full player count game of Twilight Imperium 4 that left that experience disappointed, even if it took 12 hours, 14 hours, 18 hours? I haven't.
Well, I haven't met anyone who actually left yet. They're all still playing. But I think you're right, Rob. I think that it's also aspirational. Like Twilight Imperium is one of those games. It's an epic game. When people are able to play it, it's, once a year, twice a year, except for the super committed. And it's one of those games that, because of the experience it creates, it becomes a sort of jewel in your memory. This perfect moment of gameplay. Whereas Everdell, it's neat, but it's an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours if you're playing slow, and so maybe it fades a little bit in the epicness.
I'm gonna go ahead and say, with maybe 1, possibly 2 exceptions of the other 32, or I guess the other 31 games that started out on this bracket, do you think that there's another game that's quite as much of a rite of passage as Twilight Imperium 4 is? Ooh. Mage Knight, I really think does sort the kids from the grown-ups a little bit there. And Gloomhaven.
Gloomhaven.
Look at that, Jason.
Yeah.
You and I, we're like this. If you make it all the way through Gloomhaven, you've done a thing, right?
And I gotta say, there are a few moments that stand out in your life: your marriage, birth of your child, your first play of Camel Up. Those are all really intense.
I still have one thing to look forward to.
The birth of your first camel.
So Jason, where are you standing on this Twilight Imperium versus Everdell situation?
One of the things that really stands out to me when I look at these two, we talked about some of the similarities, but one thing that just baffles me is the fact that I can play Twilight Imperium 4 for 8 hours
Easy.
and get my best score possible, and it still is maybe 1/10 of my worst score in Everdell after playing for 80 minutes. So when it comes to points per time invested ratio, Everdell clearly takes a cake on that one.
Yeah, the classic PPH calculation there, points per hour, not even a question. If you played 18 hours of Everdell and accumulated all those points, sort of from the multiple games that would represent, you might need to take the calculator app on your phone and just turn it into landscape, because you need to go to the scientific
function.
I will say Twilight Imperium has a clear advantage, though, in the number of War Suns per game. I have yet to see the War Sun card in Everdell, and I've played it several times. So, that's...
I don't think you have that expansion yet, do you?
I have an important question. A question that I'm not sure that anyone else in the gaming community has had the courage to ask. But here we stand, and, there is a mantle on our shoulders of responsibility as we conduct this tournament. And I want to ask, gentlemen, are you sure that Everdell does not take place in the Twilight Imperium 4 universe?
That's a good point.
I cannot answer that with any confidence.
So it's possible that, like Dune was remade into TI Rex,
The Twilight Imperium.
it's possible that Everdell is really just an expansion of Twilight Imperium 4. Think about it. You could play a whole game of Everdell in between your turns of Twilight Imperium 4.
That's true. About it. That's very true.
I think it might be very true. I'll say again, I'm not upset if either one of these two games wins. What about you guys?
Between TI4 and Everdell, I've got to be honest, they both have their merits. And I'm going to be happy rooting for either of these in the next round. Now, I don't recall who they'd be up against in the next round, so they may become my underdog or lesser version there. But I feel like that you can't have a loser between these two.
Let me tell you who they're going to be up against. They're either going to be up against the Crew or Brass. That's who they're going to be up against.
Ooh.
Talk about hot heat. Well, there you have it. I want to take us in a slightly different direction. So here's my question for you two. And I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. I know sometimes people don't like to, in such a public arena, answer the big questions. But we owe it to the listeners. We owe it to the community. Jason, I'm going to start with you. If Everdell were an animal, what animal would it be?
I'm pretty sure it would actually be a space lion.
Now, I'm going to ask you, if Twilight Imperium were an animal, what would it be? What animal?
That would be a duck-billed platypus.
See? Now, that is the kind of insight that you can't get just anywhere.
Indeed.
Jason Brooks, I thank you for that insight. Brendan, over to
I
you.
feel so raw right now.
Brendan, the Crew. If the Crew were a tree, what kind of tree would it be?
If the Crew were a tree...
Yep. You have to answer.
Yeah, it's got to be one of those, like a aspen or a lumber pine, something that grows real fast.
I was thinking conifer too. I was not thinking a deciduous tree. Brendan, if Brass Birmingham were a tree, what type of tree would it be?
Well, I can't help but think that they age beer in oak barrels. It's got to be oak, right?
I was thinking oak as well. This, you know.
We got something going here.
I think that there's something to be said here. So, are the oak voters going to come out?
Or the
are the
duck-billed
pine
platypus
voters coming out? Are the platypi supporters, the supporters of Platypi coming out? Or is it going to be Space Lines? I don't know. But I do know how to find out. And that is by going over to Twitter. You're going to go to @GameFightShow.
The Game Fight Show.
And there's a simple 3-part plan that I need you to follow. It's vote, vote, vote.
In which order?
Well, you want to vote, then you vote.
And then you vote.
Before we go to the wrap-up and the scores, I was hoping that Jason could tell us a little bit more about this Legacies that we mentioned earlier. So in case any of our viewers don't know about it, what is it? And how can they get it?
I wasn't hoping. I am outright insisting. Jason, the public needs to know about this wonderful game that you have wrought upon the gaming community. Please talk to us about your masterpiece that is Legacies.
Well, Legacies is a strategic Euro game that takes place over the course of 300 years, but does not take that long to play. Luckily, where you are making many strategic decisions based on multi-choice cards that you have in your hand, as well as global actions that anyone can trigger on the board. Not too unlike Twilight Imperium 4 when I think about one of the other items on our list here. There are some comparisons. But we will be delivering to all of our orders this summer, and you have until March 7th to place an order through Kickstarter. Because we will be closing that pledge manager to get it out into people's hands by then.
So that is this Sunday?
That is this Sunday, indeed.
Folks.
Act fast.
All right, now I have a 4-part plan. It is vote, 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 buy. Really do yourself a favor. This is a wonderful game. If I'm not mistaken, this is an intercontinental game. The design process that's going to bring this to your door has involved people on multiple continents working together harmoniously.
It has.
I don't even know how you find an artist on Antarctica. That's hardcore.
I don't know how the penguin holds the pencil in his hands. That's what really impresses me. I think they're called flippers. Yeah.
Brendan and I have both played Legacies multiple times. I can tell you one way that it is similar, besides that has been mentioned, to Twilight Imperium 4 is I've never had a bad time playing that game. I had fun losing, dramatically losing, embarrassingly losing, was a hoot. I say go check that thing out. Speaking of checking things out, dare we check out the last results from round 1 and see who went all the way there between Pandemic and Chronicles of Crime and Gloomhaven versus War of the Rings?
I've been waiting, Rob. I've been waiting to find out.
This is the whole reason I came.
Eleanor, give it to us.
All right, everyone, it's time for this week's results. With the 4 fantastic games that faced off on the last day of our first round, we truly have no losers to report to you today. That being said, there are 2 winners. There isn't a gamer out there who would bat an ear at hearing that Pandemic and Gloomhaven are our victors. So you won't have to figure out what batting an ear is, as they both won their bouts. Let's hear it for Chronicles of Crime and War of the Ring. They will both be missed as the tournament rolls on. Back to you.
Wow. It's great to get the first round over. It was hard to see those games go, though.
I'm gobsmacked.
But
I lost. I can't lie. I lost money. I lost money. That was not how I saw it playing out.
I'll edit that out. I don't want the people to know the sort of back alley betting that we do here behind the scenes.
The delivery of Legacies is now in jeopardy.
There goes all his profits from Legacies. But what I can tell you is we will be buoyed by these games going forward into the second round. So deserving, just like the 4 games we talked about today, just like the 4 games we're going to talk about on Monday. I want to say thank you so much to Jason Brooks of Brookspun Games.
Thank you, Jason.
Give us your website where we can go to order Legacies.
Absolutely. Feel free to check out www.brookspungames.com. That's BROOKS. P as in pun, UN.
I assume that, Brendan, in our Twitter, you'll have a link over to Jason's good
Indeed.
stuff over there.
Indeed, we will. In fact, if you are listening to this episode, that link is already there.
Whoa!
The magic.
Future.
Once again, thank you so much. I'm going to thank Eleanor for giving us the results. I'm going to thank you, Brendan. And I'm going to thank the listeners for tuning in to this hot heat. Now go over and vote, and I'll see you on Monday. Ta-ta!
Give it to.
Brought to you by
Rattlebox Games.